and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. Here we are on the day after the election, taping on Wednesday afternoon with a stellar lineup of guests, but a little pain in our hearts.
A lot of pain, and we're pretty much in mourning. But let's introduce our panel and then get to them. And because what we're here to do, and we urge you to do the same at home, is gather your friends around you and try to figure out where we go from here. So we have with us Gabe Gonzalez, who is a news producer and correspondent at mic.com, that's mic.com. We have Jillian Weiss, who is the executive director of the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund. Our old friend Joan Gibbs, who's an activist and attorney, and Reginald Thomas Brown, who is with Vocal New York, a community leader. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. It's a hard day for all of us.
And we want to just start by going around and giving each of you just a minute or two to give us your top thought, and then we'll turn it into a conversation. But just Reginald, let's start with you.
I volunteered Channel 13. That's where I was right before I came. And when Hillary came on to do her concession speech, people were crying. I was traumatized. I did not watch the returns last night because I wanted to be able to have a good night's sleep. So I'm glad that I'm here, but that's what I'm dealing with.
Okay. Joan?
Well, I spent this morning talking to some friends of mine, and one of my friends and I talked about Germany and when Hitler came to power, and how he was voted in. You know, people don't often think of it was, but he was voted in. And, I'm one of those people who reluctantly use the word fascist because I think it signifies something incredibly dangerous and devastating for people. But I'm rethinking that position because of the racism and this sexism, this misogyny, as well as everything else that fueled Trump's candidacy, and the people voted for him, notwithstanding that.
Jillian?
Well, first I want to say that I'm not speaking in my official capacity as executive director of Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund, but as a private citizen. I spent the election down in Port St. Lucie, Florida, where I was assisting voters as a poll attorney for the Clinton campaign, voters who were having difficulty, getting into the polls or had questions about voting. And I spent the last, 10, 15 hours with Trump supporters who were quite vocal, and we had many conversations. And, while I was there, I was very calm because I thought, well, it's very clear to me that Hillary's going to win this election. It's just, she's so prepared. She has so considered everything that needs to be done. I mean, I was down there with many, many other volunteers through the state of Florida, state of Ohio, various other states. And so when I woke up at 3 a.m. and saw the news, I really was devastated, and I do feel traumatized. And I know that much of the transgender community feels traumatized. It is going to be a very dark 4 years for transgender people in this country.
Gabe?
Yeah. So covering this election has been difficult, I think, because as a journalist, you're taught to compartmentalize your views about candidates. And I think Donald Trump in particular has been an extraordinary candidate in that I don't think opposition to him is strictly partisan, but it comes out of a fear for people's livelihoods and lives. So I think realizing that was happening last night was a very rude awakening. And in particular, I'd been looking at Latino voter turnout in two very crucial states, Florida and Nevada. And in Florida, in early voting, there were already 85% more Latinos voting in early voting, and there were 70% more eligible Latino voters in Nevada than there were in 2012. And I heard and felt such a mobilization on behalf of Latino communities. And to not see that materialize into electing a president that will actually look out for queer rights, for immigrant rights, for trans rights, It's really sad. And I think a lot of us are still wondering how this happened. And I think we all know. We've sort of been ignoring the elephant in the room, but grappling with the reality of this is a little shocking, I think.
Andy?
I'm in mourning. I heard. You know, as an activist, we work so hard to achieve these little things that we talk about on the show every week, little bits of civil rights that we've been able to pick up, big victories. A lot of that is going to go away that we have already won under this presidency because of the way he can change the court, but just things he can do with the stroke of a pen on the first day, getting rid of all of those Obama executive orders that he promised to do. So what it makes me feel is that, my God, we have to work 10 times as hard just to hang on to some of the things that we've won. So it's very, very daunting, and it's depressing as hell.
I didn't cry. I know a lot of people who did, including a neighbor of mine who just came over and started weeping. I am astonished. I am gobsmacked. This is surrealism in everyday life to me. The idea that we would say President Donald Trump just makes no sense to me at all. But I have to say that while I find him a monster, the people around him scare me 10 times as much.
Yes.
And the fact that he is such a novice at any of this means to me that he can be manipulated. And, you know, on the front page of the New York Times, we see stories about his staff manipulating him through this whole election. And the idea that, you know, Steve Bannon now has power, and Roger Ailes, and Kellyanne Conway, and Reince, and Pence, and all his cronies, and the Koch brothers, and all the right-wing, relentless, horrible people who are going to push him towards just awful, homicidal actions is what scares me.
That's a nice start.
Yeah. But Gabe, let me go back to you about Latino voting, because you know, one thing we've, I hope, learned over the years is not to blame particular communities for voting. Nonetheless, I am mystified, not blaming, just mystified by a third of Latinos voting for Trump.
Yeah, likewise. It was 29% this year, and that number actually went up from Mitt Romney, which absolutely baffles me. Because I've never seen a candidate come for Latino communities the way Donald Trump has. To make generalizations about immigrants, undocumented or otherwise. And this goes hand in hand with his positions on Muslims as well, you know, to make generalizations about people based on ethnicity or religion. And it's scary to not see that increased Latino voter turnout materialize into something positive. And it's scary. I mean, I'm grappling with this morning. I have relatives in Florida who are Latino and who voted for Trump. And I'm still trying to wrap my...
You're from Florida originally.
Yeah, I was born there. Sort of wishing I'd kept my registration. But it's baffling. And you know, I talked to my little sister this morning. She's sort of the first person I thought of last night when I kind of lost it. Because, again, compartmentalizing until the very last minute, and then the reality of it hit me. I was talking to my sister, and the phrase we used on the phone is putting politics over personhood, right? The fact that my relatives can say that their economic issues outweigh the violation of rights we'll see toward queer people, toward trans people, toward Muslims in this country. And it's scary that people can sort of push that aside and consider that dehumanizing people comes secondary to what you imagine a Trump economic policy might look like, which we're all left imagining because we're really slim on details right now. Yeah.
I blame your people, white people.
52% of white women
Someone's
voted for
calling
Trump,
it the white lash.
Oh, yes, Van Jones last night.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's what happened.
Yeah.
It was the revenge of white people who felt that they were losing their country, that they don't want to share with the rest of us. You know, so I blame our people.
And I would call it a combination of revenge and excitement on their part, that they are energized and motivated. Jillian, can you talk to us though about the real world implications for trans people? Because the whole storyline for the last few years has been the Obama administration making a really aggressive effort to do what it can as an executive branch to further the rights of transgender people, and that is totally at risk right now.
Well, I think that's true. The Obama administration made amazing strides towards transgender equality. I mean, there were executive orders, of course, with regard to public sector employees, that there would not be discrimination based on gender identity. There were regulations put in place with the Federal Housing Administration, with OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
Federal contractors.
Yes, absolutely, and you know, others as well. So all of these we're likely to see a rollback. Sometimes it can be difficult to roll back regulations, but not all that difficult, and if there's a will, there's a way. Also, I am involved through my organization with the Department of Justice, having brought its first case on behalf of a transgender employee in Oklahoma, and you know, I'm kind of wondering where that will go once the administration changes. And you know, a lot of other federal efforts that have been made with regard to transgender people that, you know, more than the fact that it necessarily helped, you know, thousands or millions of people, the fact that it was on the books to say, we value you. You are not the monsters and weirdos that you have been made out to be. You are human beings entitled to civil rights, and we respect that, and that is going to go away.
Reginald, you were here before a few months ago on a panel we put together of longtime HIV survivors.
Yes.
You're an activist in the HIV community.
Yes.
Do you, from that perspective, have any particular take on this?
Well, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is the Ryan White Act, which a lot of funding for AIDS comes from. That has to come up for renewal every, I don't know how often, but that has to come up for a vote. And I don't know if you think there's the thing about HOPWA, housing opportunity for people with AIDS. Right now, they want to redistribute the money so that the people in the South can get more, which historically they've gotten less because they've done it on the cumulative amount of people as opposed to the people actually had it. We in New York are not against that. We say there should be more money so that funding's not taken from New York so that we don't lose the momentum that we have, because it works. It works. So actually, we're being punished because it works so that we can help the people in the South. So like I said, it's not about not helping the people in the South. It's about having more money so that we don't lose and they can come up.
And things like a push for a cure funding and you know, prevention in particularly communities of color, and is all that going to have less impetus in a Trump administration?
I don't see much support for that. In fact, I don't see much support for anything. I mean, other than his own agenda, which we don't really know. He always says it's
lower
huge,
taxes for the rich.
It's going to be something big. It's going to be a big thing, but you know, I don't know. But all I know is that we have to fight. That there's no. You know, we in June there was a People's Summit, which was a group of Bernie supporters. About 3,000 of us got together, sponsored by the National Nurses Association. And we decided then that the revolution was going to continue. So we said at that time that no matter who got elected, we still had work to do. So even with this contender, so we are prepared so we just have to do what we have to do. It'll be more difficult. We have to be more strategic in the way we do about it. But the point is that we cannot not do anything, because to do so would be to, like you say, give up on all those things that we worked for. And it hurts. I'm hurting now.
Sure.
I'm hurting.
And Joan, you have a long-term perspective. You've been through a lot of battles. What do you see worth doing immediately and long-term to try to start turning this around?
I think that, I don't know if you remember this. Years ago, I was thinking about this organization. We had this organization, CRASH. It was the Committee Against Racism, Sexism, something. It was formed around when there was the big attacks on gay people, I guess from the late 70s or 80s. You remember CRASH?
I do remember the name.
Okay. And I was thinking this morning, we need to form organization of that, broad fronts to take up these issues and come together. Because I don't think that, you know, that's not to discount single issue organizations, but I do think that we need to come together because this is going to be a serious battle we have to wage. And so we have to come together and be inclusive. And I think that there's possibilities for that are good, because I think, for example, Black Lives Matter, I think has set the people who are engaged in that are really, particularly young people and the older people as well, have set down a good paradigm. And I think that the way in which they've included queer people and transgender people really has really made me feel inspired. So, and I hope that we can, build broad organizations and bring us all together.
Gabe, you work at a website that is particularly geared towards millennials. Can you talk to us about, first of all, what's going on today there in reaction, and help us understand what the younger community is thinking about the whole political situation or the world?
Yeah, absolutely.
Speak for everybody.
I know, right? Yeah, as the voice of a generation.
Yes. Sorry.
I know, right? Well, no, it's tough because I think a lot of young people right now, we're envisioning a future. I mean, I made this joke, and this is going to give away my age, but I was like, I got to deal with President Trump until I'm 30. I thought that by the time I got to 30, you know what I mean? We'd be a ways away from where we are right now. And so that's really wild to me. And the other surprising thing is that people think that these issues will disappear as older generations die off, right? It's like, oh, I can't wait until these old bigots die off. A majority of white people between the ages of 18 to 29 voted for Trump. Those are millennials. That's scary. Racism in this country doesn't die off.
Why?
I mean, I think it's the same thing that's motivating Latinos and women to vote against their own self-interests. You know what I mean? I think there's discontent, and I don't think they need facts or a real reason to find a candidate to rally behind when there's discontent. I think if someone's just echoing what you're feeling, whether it's economic frustration or frustration over anything else, you're going to respond to that. And what we've seen with Trump is not a response to facts or plans or preparation, but a response to this gut feeling, right?
It's fear.
Yeah, truly. And it's verbal diarrhea, and people just reach for the words they like in there. Yeah. It's like, it's wild. And I was surprised when I saw that number. And so I think it's a wake-up call that there's still work to do, particularly with young voters. Number? I saw it at work today. One of my coworkers showed it to me. I don't remember the site, but
well, on a daily basis in your work, what do you see as concerns from a younger generation?
Yeah, I mean, I like to characterize younger generations as more empathetic. I think we've really seen a push for the movement for Black lives, for trans rights, particularly in North Carolina. I think that's gotten a lot of attention from young voters, which is really promising and very encouraging. And I think young voters still know that there's a fight left, and we've made small wins in some local places. Joe Arpaio is not sheriff of Maricopa County anymore. Like that's right? That's a great win.
Yeah, you clap. When he's head of the Department of Homeland Security.
Secretary of State Arpaio, maybe.
Hey, do you know how many times Trump said nice things about Joe Arpaio in the campaign?
It's wild.
He'll find a job for him.
Truly.
Well, the question is if they want to bring in people who they can disguise, the fascists who they can disguise to run these things.
They don't need to disguise anybody.
As opposed, but if you want to,
disguise, they had Rudy Giuliani as their chief spokesman.
They got an endorsement from David
New York City for 8 years.
They got the KKK endorsement. They still.
Kellyanne Conway out there lying all day long, every day. They're not looking for disguise.
Absolutely not. No, they are out in the open, and that's what's scary about this election. That I think. No one's saying that racism is suddenly popping up again. We all know that this has existed, but the fact, there's a new face on it now.
Exactly.
Well, we lived through the Reagan administration, and he
lived through the Nixon administration.
But I should also say, a lot of people did not live through for that matter, the Johnson, Nixon, or Reagan administrations.
Yeah.
I mean, Reagan allowed AIDS to get out of control.
That's right.
35 million dead.
That's
35 million infected with HIV because of his inaction.
That's right. 6 years.
So a lot of people did not live through that. You want to talk about devastation and turmoil? I mean, but the question is, what do you want to alert people to be alive to in terms of the terrible things that can happen that we better try to stop if we can?
Well, I mean, one thing, and it's not like I have any particular answers to how we stop these things.
Oh, please.
The Supreme Court is going to be particularly important, obviously, and specifically for transgender people because the court has just recently, as you know, taken up a case, the case of Gavin Grimm, who brought a lawsuit against his school in Virginia because they did not permit this young transgender man to use the restroom, the proper restroom. And he won in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. So now it's been taken up by the Supreme Court. So when the Trump nominee is dropped in there, I think that that is going to cause serious problems, particularly because this case will affect all of the other cases. There are hundreds of cases that have been brought since 2000 in which transgender people have been found to have rights. This case could erase them all.
Now, let's be clear. Trump gets to replace the late Scalia, and he said he wants somebody like Scalia. But that still, on some issues, including LGBT issues, leaves Anthony Kennedy, leaves a 5-4 pro, at least gay majority on the court for the time being. And then we have to hope that Ruth Bader Ginsburg lives to be 100. Because if he gets to replace one of the liberals, we're facing the loss of abortion rights.
Absolutely.
Same-sex marriage can be reversed. What they would do is allow the states to ban it again if they wanted to. It doesn't mean it'd be wiped out entirely. No. And I do have a question, a legal question. What can they do about the Defense of Marriage Act? The federal Defense of Marriage Act was overturned.
Right.
If a new Supreme Court, can somebody sue and say we want that reinstated, or does Congress have to act again?
Congress would have to act again.
Which, with a Republican Congress, is not impossible.
Right.
Can we take a little hope from the fact that we may have defeated Governor Pat McCrory in North Carolina?
I hope so.
Oh,
narrowly.
really?
Possibly.
It's very
If we did.
If we did.
We
is
didn't
correct.
hold the legislature down there.
And we got rid of that closet case Mark Kirk, that racist dog in Illinois.
I still can't believe the HRC supported him. I mean, that was such a disappointment.
Because you didn't live through Al
I know,
D'Amato.
right, exactly. It's just like, ugh.
We endorse incumbents who are friendly to gay people, even if they are closet cases.
racist.
And we got rid of the very racist right-wing Scott Garrett, a congressman in New Jersey. That was a targeted race, and that was good. Bill Maher said on his show last Friday that, hold on, I've got this, that this was a slow-moving right-wing coup. I'm not so sure
Well, he
it's
was
so
talking about
slow.
what Comey was doing in the.
Well, he's talking about the whole
I
thing.
think the whole thing, and that's a very good description.
It
And
struck
comes
me
back
at the
to,
time.
to what Joan brought about. Because when I first listened to Trump, when I allowed it, I said, this sounds like Hitler, sounds like Mein Kampf. It's like, tell people, if you tell people what they're going to do, they'll not believe you. Everything he was going to do, he wrote down in his book, but nobody believed him, and he was elected. So I see the parallels. I mean, I think if it's fascism, you call it fascism.
I resent the Democrats for not taking more seriously the anger and despair of people who do have economic insecurity, and I think the Democrats were too smug and did not reach out enough. Now, I think sexism, racism, all of that was implicated, but
What I have to say this, I was always sort of critical of Hillary Clinton, although I changed my opinion over the months. But when she said that about them being deplorables, I thought that was blown.
horrible.
Terrible.
But I didn't think it was. I think she was absolutely right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Deplorable.
I don't
say that.
I know you don't say that, but she was very honest.
Because she just said racist and bigoted people are deplorable. We should all be able to agree on that.
And people should have, and they drug her over the coals, made her apologize. But absolutely, I feel, part of me, and I guess because I have studied World War II so closely, and I feel very passionate about it, is that, the same thing happened, after World War I, the Germans, they were, the Versailles Treaty, they were treated so badly, so they just scapegoated the Jews.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And
similar.
Roman people, or so-called gypsies,
Yes.
lesbian, and that's what they did.
And intellectuals as well.
Right.
And they were in a depression, right?
Yeah.
So that's
Triggered by the peace treaty.
Right. And I think, I feel that people should be empathetic toward people who were suffering, you know, the people who supported Trump. But right now, my concern is not with them. My concern is with, you know, transgender people or Muslims.
Yes.
Or immigrants who are under the threat of being deported.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I can't feel sorry for some.
Well,
I just think there should have been more direct outreach.
Well, okay.
Well, here's the thing. I think Democrats thought they had actually won on that front, though, which is why they didn't address it. Because you look at unemployment, it's down to 4.9%.
Yes.
Gas is low, even though that's not within the control of the president. People love pitting that on the president. We're in a great economic state right now. Much better than we were 8 years ago.
But average people, come on. I mean,
This is true, yes.
really,
Yeah.
their condition, they're feeling, they wouldn't be using all those opioids and committing suicide. All the health indicators for the poor white people have gone way up. Of course, that's always been true for people of color and other outcasts and LGBT people who are disproportionately homeless and everything else.
Right.
I mean, and you know, you don't see us belly aching. We try to work to change things. But you know, but these people.
I bellyache.
No, but we are activists and we try to change things.
Yes.
You know, the only lever of power we have left in this country is 49 members of the Senate who can filibuster some of the worst legislation. But the president has his, I mean, I don't even want to talk about
If they don't get rid of the filibuster.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I mean, the president has his hand on so much power.
Yeah.
I mean, I just can't imagine
That's what's frightening. That someone who's so immature has that much power. That the bully, the people that bullied me as a kid. I mean, if they had that much power, I was terrified as a kid growing up. I mean, to think that this man has so much power, can do so much just because he can. Just because he can. He said, what did he say? I could walk down Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and people still vote for me.
And they did.
And they did. I mean, even though he didn't vote. So it's like, that's.
And someone who's such a narcissist.
Oh, truly. Yes.
But it is his political inexperience that does scare me because it makes him such a wild card.
A combination of all that. His
Anything,
immaturity and
yes.
all of it. That's all of it. Yeah.
And if he gets bored with the job and wants to leave because he's trapped in the White House, it's Mike Pence.
Who wants to electrocute gay youth? So we got great options with our VP there too. Like that's.
This is insane.
This is really wild. Yeah.
Insane. Where do we go from here in this discussion?
Well, let's talk about what, in fact, we can and should do, because we have got to do something. And, I mean, do we give up on electoral politics? Do we double down? Do we need more people to run for office? You know, we ended up with these candidates because running for office has become such a horrible thing. We've made it so difficult and so ugly by raking people over the coals who run for office, and thus we're left with people who have to have the hide of an alligator to run, and or the narcissistic personality. Can we make politics a doable thing again for the young, for everybody else?
I mean, I think young
Anybody
voters,
stepping up here to run for office?
I thought about it. I thought about it, but I thought the things I would have to go through, I'd have to compromise to do it. I just couldn't really see doing that because maybe it's my limitation, but I'm so focused on what I believe is right that to do that, to have to compromise that, I think I'd rather work on the outside, pushing in as opposed to trying to be in, because once I'm in there, it's like a lot of things really are out of your control because it's a machine. And once you get in there, even though you're thinking you want to do something about changing it, there are things that are going on that are very subtle, and so where you know it, you're doing the very thing that you were against. So I had a gut, I said, you know what, I think Reginald would be much better on the outside looking in, then you can really be more effective.
Well, the other thing is that really where our relief is going to come from is from the courts. Because right now I don't see any legislative agenda we're going to be able to pursue in the short term or even perhaps in the long term. We still have federal judges on the bench who are willing to recognize rights when they see them.
That's good.
So many of them are Republican.
That's good.
So,
That's true. That's good. That's
Barack Obama had 8 years to remake the federal judiciary, and he did in great part. And so my sense is that if I want the most bang for my buck, then I will bring cases in court on behalf of transgender people, gender nonconforming people, gay people, people of color, people with HIV. This is where we're going to really be able to hold the road, so to speak, hold the line. And so I think that's very important. We need to put a lot more money into that. We've put a tremendous amount of money into electoral politics, and that's great. I think that's a good thing. It's time to put money behind organizations like Lambda Legal and others, including my own.
Transgender Legal Defense Fund. Do you have a particular agenda at your organization, at the Transgender Legal Defense Fund?
We do. It's a rather long and kind of complicated analysis that we've gone through. I just started there in July after taking over from Michael Silverman, who was the long-term executive director and founder, who did an amazing job, started the organization in 2003 when nobody was interested in transgender rights, and really built it into something great. So, we are working on that. We will have to refigure in light of, recent changes.
I do want to say something about democracy. Well, go ahead, Joe.
That's from the legal, as another lawyer. I mean, one of the things that I always look at law, the courts, in my opinion, have been their most liberal when there was a mass movement outside, right? So, I mean, you take, for example, Brown versus Board of Education, right? Brown, there's various reasons why it was decided at the time, but it didn't become a reality until black people, some white people, the civil rights movement made it a reality. Right. So I think that we can, I spent my whole career practicing federal court, so it's one of the reasons why I try not to practice that much anymore. I think we have to be sensitive to having a movement too. We just can't give our money to legal organizations because the organization I think in the last 30 years that did one of the things most forget was ACT UP.
Yes.
Absolutely. They didn't file no lawsuits.
Absolutely.
But they
did.
Yeah. I want to say something about
move the queer agenda forward in ways that is yet to be completely recognized.
Brown v. Board, Obergefell, Windsor, Roe v. Wade, these were all terrific decisions, and we all deserve the protection of the Constitution of the United States. However, when things are decided that way, it breeds resentment in the land that you decided this, and we have democratic processes. Right. I mean, the right wing got started over the ban on it was partly Brown v. Board, and then we're going to put our kids in Christian white schools, and then the elimination of school prayer. Of course, it had to be done. It's unconstitutional, but that's what bred the right wing movement. Right. But if we had worked these things through, we didn't work a lot of these things through our communities, and that makes them very fragile, and it does mean they can be taken away through another court decision.
I think this is something that people on the right have pushed, the idea that you didn't do it in the proper way.
No,
I mean, I understand what you're saying.
I'm not saying it's improper.
No, but you're saying it's stronger, there's more roots if we run it through this community process. Very well and good. I am not willing to wait to run it through that community process while transgender people are living on the streets, are living with incomes under $10,000 a year, have 2 and 4 times the amount of unemployment and underemployment, particularly trans people of color. I'm not willing to wait anymore. I'm done waiting.
And I think we should demand more of our local governments, which are in the hands of Democrats.
Well, our local governments are great. New York City is awesome. Are you kidding? The strides that legislators here in New York City have made and the funding that they have put towards these issues is fabulous. But we're one tiny city, even though it's a very large city. But we are one small point on the map in a huge, huge country. There are transgender people in every state in this country. In Kansas, in Arizona, in California, in North Dakota, and Oklahoma. And they do not need to have to wait till it runs through this process. Yes, let's do that process also. I'm not going to wait. You do the process.
Well, as
just when people don't like to lean in too much on the table.
Because the camera is catching too much of everybody. But Joan is right. It needs to be simultaneous, and and we've talked for 20 years on this show about the need for a grassroots movement, and how and I think there is a transgender grassroots movement that has facilitated some of this progress. So I think it has to be a combination. Look, I'm a big believer in all these legal victories, and I agree no one should wait a second. Go. But the rest of us all have to chime in and make sure the grassroots movement is there to support it.
Yes, but let me push back on that just a little bit. I
Okay.
agree with you, yes, 100%, but like, for example, we talk about ACT UP. That was a particular point in history when there were certain forces that were driving people to say no more, and I'm going to go into the streets and I'm going to throw blood and I'm going to,
No blood. Fake blood.
Fake blood, sorry, okay. We do not have the conditions right now that make people do that kind of thing. There are a few organizations out there that are working on that. Get Equal is a perfect example. I was involved with that, and I'm very proud of that. But you don't see the masses of people like you did with ACT UP.
Stay
And why
tuned.
is that?
It has
Truly,
always,
yeah.
look, as someone who was very, very, very involved in ACT UP, as was Joan, it has always been my contention that ACT UP was a unique experience and came about because gay white men who thought they had privilege were shocked to find out they didn't,
Right.
and had enough arrogance to get angry and fight back,
Right.
and were empowered enough
Right.
as gay white men to be able to do that. Communities that are not so empowered are less likely to stand up and fight at that level. And a bunch of us who came from other movements, other experiences, the anti-war movement, the feminist movement. One guy got up one day, remember Mike saying I was the national secretary of SDS?
Yes, Mike Spiegel.
Yes, that was an exciting moment. But people came together and they joined in because they could see that that's where the action was. And that is an unreplicatable moment, I think, because people are, you don't have such a mass of empowered people fighting for their lives. And the other thing about that was great was those of us who came in had the chance to sort of hold those guys hostage and force them to become feminists or anti-racists, and it was kind of magical, but it was unique.
Well, surely the civil rights movement was a movement of disempowered people who gained power and affected an awful lot of things.
Absolutely, and had different organizing methods. Watch Eyes on the Prize if you want to see that evolution. That's a great, and you can find that on YouTube, and that's a great education. But yeah, absolutely, and every time, every movement, every community has to find its own version to be effective that way. I couldn't agree more. I don't want to get discouraged, though. I want to feel that we can fight back. So, do we go to the inauguration? And
I was saying we should go to the inauguration if Hillary was elected and put her on the spot and move our agenda forward. So now we really have a reason to go to the inauguration.
Well, there's a demonstration today, I think, at
It's Union
Union
Square.
Square.
no, isn't it 59th Street?
This
There's one-
really?
there's
Maybe there's a
I'm sure there are more than
59th
one.
So
Street.
I think there will be rolling demonstrations.
And
59th Street
Trump
would be a
Tower.
Trump Tower.
Right.
Yeah.
I think one of the most moving marches I was ever a part of in New York was the Millions March, which was in collaboration with the Movement for Black Lives. And
Which
so
one?
I think there's the
Oh,
Millions
yeah.
March,
The
the really huge one.
The silent march.
Yes,
The silent march.
I think it was
yes,
that
yes.
one.
We
Yeah.
got the
Because
support
there-
stop and frisk. Yes. I
Oh
was
no,
part of
it was the
no,
Millions
he's talking
March.
about one that went down. Was it Fifth
Yeah,
Avenue
it
or
went-
something?
it
went all
Yeah,
around.
it started
there.
uptown and went all the way down to
Okay,
City Hall.
all right,
This was
okay.
several months ago, like earlier this year, end of last year.
Okay.
And seeing people mobilize on behalf of Black lives and police brutality more than I expected was very
Okay,
encouraging.
right.
And so I wonder if the movements tonight and these sort of gatherings and rallies will sort of cue people into the fact that the support and the tools to protest and become activists are there. And I think with my generation in particular, there's this idea that you're doing enough by engaging people on the internet. And I don't think we are used to going out on the streets and protesting and having to yell over the cacophony for things. And as scary as this is to say, I think a Trump presidency will will push young people like myself
Yes.
into understanding that the stakes are much higher now, and that we can't just tweet.
Yeah.
We got to go out and do action.
The election of an African American as president spawned the Tea Party.
Yeah.
You know, and they took the streets over while we were exhaling
Totally,
over
yeah.
we elected
Yeah.
Barack Obama. But
And
you
we
always
realized-
have to be in the street. You
Right.
always have to
Correct,
be out
exactly,
there.
Yeah. And it doesn't end at the election. That's the other thing I've
Right.
learned too, is that the election is just a blip. The point is the long-term agenda. You always have to have a long-term agenda. They have had a long-term agenda for the longest time. We just sort of go from election to election. Oh, he's elected, now we stop. No. You keep going, you keep going, you keep going. So that's why I say, as I'm thinking too, that his election is probably a galvanizing. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise, because I think a lot of people, I'm hoping that a lot of people will say, you know, take this opportunity to really get out and shut stuff down when necessary.
I hope you're right, but having lived through, I remember '68 was the year I became political.
Okay. All right.
And a lot of people said that about Nixon. Oh, Nixon, the people
right.
going to rise up.
Okay,
You know,
all right.
We got rid of him.
Well, we did. We got rid of him.
Something
and that
happened.
worked.
And
Yeah.
meanwhile,
Yeah.
But the point is that I still think it could be a good thing. It'll be a good thing that, if nothing else, maybe millennials will come out and be visible.
Sure. Well,
And
I mean,
maybe
what's
people
frustrating-
my generation who still aren't willing to get out will get out and make noise. And know that by putting your body on the line, that means something.
That's right. And what's frustrating is that it shouldn't take immigrants and trans people feeling like their lives are at risk to galvanize them.
It
You know,
shouldn't.
much like it shouldn't take
It shouldn't.
millions of gay
It
deaths
shouldn't.
to mobilize action on AIDS. Like,
shouldn't,
it's
right.
sad that we have to get to this point to
Right.
become politically active and push and yell for what we
Well,
want.
I wanted to also say that you didn't mention all of the transgender people that are being murdered.
Yeah, absolutely.
Women of color. That, I mean,
Well,
it's like,
and the importance of that is that it's a confluence of forces. It's not just one thing. It's not. And the other thing is that, you know, we tend to think like, oh, you know, this is like some bad apples that are going out and murdering transgender women. If you force a group of people into a lower economic status and you put them into area where there's danger and there's, you know, gangs and there's murder and stuff, then you're going to see stuff like that. And it's because of our racist background and history that we push transgender people of color, along with other people of color, into these situations, and then we're like, oh my God, why is this happening? Absolutely. Well, we haven't dealt with this for hundreds of years. So, you know, the question is, what's going to make the difference now?
Right.
And yes, people have to go out and protest. We have to activate them. We have to remember we live in a capitalist society where we are worked to death, and people are just trying to exist. They're just trying. They're working 2 and 3 and 4 jobs. So you want them to come out to a protest at the end of the day? Maybe they're going to get their head bashed in, or they're going to have some other kind of problems. You know what? They just want to make it to the next day. So we have a whole confluence of problems that need to be addressed that are not going to go away tomorrow, and it's not just going to be by blaming people saying, well, you didn't come out to my protest.
Right.
No.
We have to somehow work on all these problems together in concert, different groups, different races, different economic statuses, and really address all of this comprehensively and not just one thing.
I would just like to add to that. I was reading Runaway Inequality, and he was talking about how so many of our issues are siloed. We're siloed instead of being,
Divide and conquer.
Absolutely.
Very
Right.
successful
But we tend
strategy.
to do it, we tend to do it ourselves with
Yes.
with our things. So, but then
No, it's true. But I mean, for example, you know, in the trans rights movement, this has got to link up with Black Lives Matter and
Absolutely.
trans and issues for people of color, economic
stop and
issues,
frisk.
class issues,
Yes.
police abuse issues. We've got to all work
Exactly.
together. And for some reason, we don't.
Yeah.
You know, other people that I've spoken to who are working within organizations are kind of like, well, that's not our issue. That thinking
is.
has got
Yeah,
to
it is.
change.
Right.
Yeah, going back to this issue of siloing off our disparate topics,
Right.
I had a coworker who's a white gay man tell me in an elevator a few days ago that Trump had actually not said anything negative himself about gay people. And I was like, okay, so you're telling me black gay people don't exist, trans people don't matter to gay people, immigrant gay people don't exist. I was like, when you attack these other marginalized groups, when you attack black people, trans people, immigrants, you are attacking the queer people that exist
Absolutely.
within those communities
And
as well.
since this is an LGBT show, let us review for people if you haven't heard it before. He is wants to leave discrimination against transgender people to the states. He does not support the Equality Act. He is going to sign the First Amendment
Defense Act,
which will allow any person citing a religious reason to discriminate against anybody that they want to. He is going to eliminate the Obama executive orders on LGBT rights, and he is going to put on the Supreme Court people who are going to repeal same-sex marriage and possibly even reinstate the sodomy laws.
Right.
This will affect that white gay man
It will.
who doesn't want to hear about
That's exactly
other
what I told him,
communities
too.
that
Yeah,
have gay people. It will affect him too. I am struck by the extent to which, if I may totally globalize, human beings are impelled to engage in wishful thinking. Rather than act on their own behalf in ways that feel difficult to them. Whether they are working 3 jobs or whether they are unemployed, whether they are overwhelmed with family responsibilities, whatever it is, or just a general depression. I think the Trump voters are engaging in wishful thinking to think that Trump will solve whatever their problems are. I think progressives are engaged in wishful thinking. I think it is an epidemic, and I don't know how to break through that in a way that is useful and educates people that they can do this one step at a time rather than having to change the world overnight.
It sounds like you're trying to repeal human nature.
I am famous for saying that I think human beings are a very unsuccessful species, driving ourselves to extinction. Not much longer.
Truly, yeah.
I don't know.
The thing is that people need to be engaged. It's not enough to say, oh, there's things wrong in the world and you have to stop them.
Right.
They need to be engaged in some ways. Look, why do people watch so much television? It's fun. It's interesting.
Yes.
It brings you in. Why did they elect Trump? He was fun and interesting and engaging and authentic in ways that horrify me, but engaged many people. And what happened with Hillary? She was not engaging. Bernie Sanders was engaging.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton is a great leader and politician and someone who was an amazing president, not a political, powerhouse in that sense. So we need to engage people.
I think, as I said, I wasn't necessarily a fan of Hillary, but she was subjected to the most misogyny that I have ever.
Absurd
people say
scrutiny.
she's not engaging. I find her very smart.
Yes.
And why does she, people would say, oh, she doesn't smile. Why should she smile?
Absolutely. I mean, there's no need.
She was.
I can't believe how much she kept that smile on her face while she was debating Trump.
Absolutely. And
I think that what we just witnessed was, it's misogyny, and we have to look into that and unmask that. It wasn't just that, she's not engaged, she wasn't authentic. I don't find Trump authentic. I think he was a...
Totally no.
No, he's a con man.
He's a con man.
A fraud and a bully.
But that's what a con man is. They tell you things. We're going to double your money. We're going to triple your money. And you believe it. And
You'll get sick of winning. You will get sick of winning. You're going to win so much.
I think his vices were the things that elected him. Because this is the monster who's going to go to that place that we hate, who doesn't respect us, and he's going to blow it up. And I don't really care what happens after that because it's never done anything for me. And that's the attitude.
And this cult of personality, I think, has washed over the facts in such a scary way because he has pitted himself as the anti-establishment candidate. But when I look at Donald Trump, there is nothing anti-establishment about him, except for the fact that he's done the things corrupt politicians have done in his private businesses, declaring bankruptcy 5 times, collecting money on the backs of the middle class and working class workers that were fired from those jobs when he declared bankruptcy. The fact that he's hidden that, not paying his taxes, hiding his tax returns, and the only person
Not
that's
paying
lied.
his workers.
Exactly. And so it's to me, the only person that's actually lied and actually has proven he has something to hide this election is Donald Trump.
I thought it was amazing when yesterday I was in Florida and one of the Trump supporters there said to me, well, you know, he's not bought by the corporations. I said, sweetheart, he is the corporation. He is the corporation.
Absolutely.
So people don't get it.
my God, yeah.
But the question I want to get back to is
Wishful thinking.
how do we engage people? And you know, when you say wishful thinking, the other flip side of that is hope.
Yes.
You know, and that's what elected
There's a
Barack
fine line
Obama
there,
did.
yeah.
That's
He
what
was
elected
able
Trump.
to manifest that.
Hope
So how do we
elected
do
Trump.
that? How do we do that for LGBT people and people of color and people in socioeconomic classes that need to get out on the streets and do this?
I think their ox is going to have to be gored before they.
But that's not engaging. That's
Well,
that might motivate them. But
One of the things
how do we create
is to
that
lead by
charisma?
example. Just lead by example. Just get out and do it. I mean, I get out and do it. Hey, come join me to do this.
What are
Come
the
join me to do
greatest
this, yeah.
venues that you think exist for this
Yeah.
at this time? Where do we go?
Yeah.
I mean, there are some groups that we like that, you know, get out in the street, like Queer Nation, and there
Vocal
are,
New
you know,
York.
others.
Vocal
maybe-
New York.
Vocal New York.
Vocal is always out on the
Yeah,
street.
always.
Black Lives
Always,
Matter.
Yeah.
There.
So I mean, so we just lead by example.
Are there millennial or Latino groups that people can look at?
There are. I mean, I worked closely with HB Latino and Voto Latino, which is actually a great organization. They're really pushed to mobilize the Latino vote and worked on a local level. You know, really got volunteers to push these like grassroots turnout campaigns. And they were really, I mean, they were great for offering Latinos resources in multiple languages. Because another thing you look at with these polls is like, some of these polls aren't in Spanish. And a majority of support for Hillary was among Latinos who spoke both English and Spanish. So it's, again, these polls, and when you're looking at Latinos and trying to calculate how their vote will go, aren't very accurate because they don't know how to talk to Latinos yet. And I don't think our government knows how to reach out to Latinos and share tools with them. So I saw Voto Latino sharing a lot of information about, you know, if you don't have a ride to the polls, Uber and Lyft are offering you free rides.
Right.
If there's something wrong at the polls, you call this number and you'll get someone in Spanish or English. And they're a little less grassroots, you know, they're definitely like a national movement, but I think through them, I found very valuable allies and friends in this city and nationwide that I think is really helpful. And through smaller campaigns,
I
too.
was impressed that there were trans activists canvassing and working in North Carolina.
Yes. Yeah, that was great. And I think that it brought out an understanding of how this actually is affecting this group of people so that people could see, oh,
Actually,
here's the
yes,
people.
absolutely.
Here's
Yes,
the people
yes,
that
yes,
this is a problem
exactly,
for. It's not
yes.
some abstract thing.
Right.
But you know, one thing I just wanted to mention, because we talked about ACT UP, one of the things I learned about ACT UP was that the street theater and the creation of that community really galvanized people, and we need something like that. Not
Also,
just-
cute boys at the meetings.
Oh, God, yeah.
Referred to as the swim team.
I guess we'll have to get the Bernie Bros back out. See how that goes.
Yeah.
Did anything happen on election night that gave you heart?
I didn't watch.
Oh.
I couldn't watch. I wanted to sleep well, so I did not watch.
I mean,
No.
for me, it's tiny things. It's Joe Arpaio. It's Kamala Harris getting elected. It's the fact that we have a Somali American woman in a state legislature. Like they're
The
tiny
Latina
things.
woman in Nevada
Oh,
who
yes.
replaced
Catherine
Harry Reid.
Cortez
Yeah.
Mastro.
She,
Very excited
Tammy
about
Duckworth
that.
in
Yeah.
Illinois.
Yeah.
Kate Brown, the first bisexual governor. She got elected in her own right.
yeah.
Montana
In Oregon.
and West Virginia, which are deep red states, elected Democratic governors.
Absolutely.
You know,
Well, that
I
is
mean,
good.
Yeah.
You know,
But one thing, I grew up in North Carolina, and I was devastated by that because I think about Moral Monday movement in North Carolina.
Yes.
Yeah, Reverend
And how
Barber.
hard they've worked.
Yes, for a
And
long time.
And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, what happened? Because they seem to be sort of effective.
except
it being
that the
a-
legislature
it's a broad-
didn't move at all. We may
Right.
have gotten rid of the governor, which would be very helpful.
It was
And
such a- it was
elected
a
Roy Cooper.
broad-based
Well, you
movement.
know, I have only visited North Carolina briefly, but I was struck by what a large conservative, I will say, rather than worse words, how much of the state, especially in the western part of the state, was so right wing. So I think that's still there.
But I was in Asheville recently, which is
Hey,
in the western part.
New York
It's very
State
low.
couldn't even get rid of its Republican majority in the state
Yeah.
Senate. For God's sakes.
Yes.
New York State,
Yeah,
the great,
right.
you know, liberal.
Right.
Well, now we're back to my evaluation of human beings. Let's not do that. look, what breaks my heart at the moment, the Chelsea Manning case. Poor Chelsea Manning, who I think should never have been prosecuted in the first place, let alone put in for Leavenworth, and now with a second suicide attempt is being punished for that with more solitary confinement. And I doubt that the Trump Justice Department, let alone the Obama Justice Department, is going to help her.
I hope President Obama, before he leaves, pardons Chelsea Manning and also pardons Hillary Clinton, and I mean that. In other words, says, I'm giving a blanket pardon. You're not going to have her to kick around anymore. You want to lock her up, all that kind of stuff. You people are impossible, and I'm not going to let you do that. I'm pardoning her. From anything she might have done. She didn't do anything.
Yeah, the Chelsea Manning thing hurts in particular, too. I mean, not only because she's a trans woman and she's being punished with solitary, but the fact that so many Trump supporters have pointed to Julian Assange as a sort of champion for their cause. And you're looking at two people who have leaked information from the United States government, which I do think benefited the population back when they did it. But you have Trump supporters picking and choosing which one of them did the right thing, right?
Well, this is typical also of what happens to transgender people, because you see this, you do see this in court cases, you see this in legislatures and so on. It's like, oh, well, normally this would, this, you would have a case, but, well, because you're transgender, we're going to find some reason not to let you win the case, or, normally we would pass this bill, but we don't understand, these bathroom issues, whatever. Transgender people are treated as sui generis, and it is, really something to understand that it's not just logic that's driving this. No. It is something else entirely.
It's hatred.
And I also want to go back, because I don't want to...
In our last minute and a half.
Yes, I think we have 2 minutes.
Quick.
But
we'll milk it.
Sexism. One of the things that heartened me in this campaign was the rise of women talking about being abused.
Yes.
And that empowerment, that ability of women to talk about how they have been harassed and assaulted, and to stand up and speak about that, I thought was magnificent. But now with the actual election of Trump and the triumph of the misogyny, I really worry about that.
And to see women, some of the women surrounding him enabling too is worrisome. Yes, it really is. Like Kellyanne Conway, for example.
She's wild. All right, final thoughts, anybody? Anyone got...
Well, we have our work cut out for us, and as far as I'm concerned, I will be in it until I die, so I'm going to get out there and do what I need to do.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Well, I think I normally consider myself an optimist, so I think in the long run, things will get better. In the long run.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Well, yeah, in the long run. Yeah, I know.
As Martin Luther King says,
that's it.
It bends towards
and
justice.
it does, and I believe that.
Yeah.
I'm going to need some time. I'm going to need to really kind of do some self-care, as you said in the beginning. I'm not sure what that will require. But I do vow to redouble my efforts towards social justice and creating the kinds of movements that we were all talking about here. That absolutely has to be done, and I cannot rest until it is done.
You get the last word.
Yeah. Well, I've been saying, like Reginald, no matter who was elected, I knew there would be a fight on November 9th that I would have to keep pushing along with other people. It just seems I'm going to have to reorganize those priorities very intensely and fight for things I already thought were right. But the reality is I'm fighting for young women of color like my little sister. We have legal recourse, we have activism, and we do have those tiny bit of Democrats in the Senate that could save us in the end. So
and we'll be back next week.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, Jillian. Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Reginald.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching, and we will be back next week with more of Gay USA. The Lord willing and the creek don't rise. Oh, God. Bye.
Bye. Bye.